Pushpanadham.
Hello. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone.
Sir, good afternoon, sir.
The voice is clear?
Yes, sir, it's very clear, sir.
Okay. And I would like to share some slide and I think you need to allow me to share.
Sir, actually, I'm waiting for the online participants to join.
Okay,
Another
fine. Yeah.
few minutes, sir, please. Another few minutes.
Sure. Perfect.
Online participants to switch on your cameras for some time, please. For recording this session, we just request all the participants to switch on your cameras for some time. I request all the online participants to switch on your cameras for some time in order to record this session. Mhm. Mm. So it's a request from the organizers to take photograph of this session. I request all the online participants to switch on your cameras once. Okay, thank you. So we'll start this session 5, the day 2 faculty development program on outcome-based education, teaching, learning, and evaluation. We thank the resource person, especially with his short notice, he has accepted our request to share his resources on the area of direct and indirect continuous assessment tools for attainment of program outcomes and course outcomes. The resource person of this session is Dr. K. Pushpanadham Garu, Professor of Education Management of Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of Baroda, Vadodara, Gujarat. I welcome you, sir, for this session. And I request Dr. LMD Bakshu Garu, chairperson of this session, to come on to the dais to chair this session. Sir, I welcome you, sir. I also request the rapporteur of this session, Dr. V. Munaya Garu, to come on to the dais. We welcome you, sir. So we welcome the resource person. Sir, welcome, sir. Pushpanadham, sir. We hope our voice is audible to you, sir.
It's audible. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Now I request Bakshu, sir, the chairperson of this session, to continue the proceedings, please.
Good afternoon, all of you. I take it as immense pleasure to introduce our resource person, Dr. K. Pushpanadham Sargaru, who is working as professor in education and management at the Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of Baroda, Vadodara, Gujarat. Professor K. Pushpanadham Garu obtained doctorate by the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda for the research work in the area of decentralization of educational management. He completed his MA Sociology at Devi Ahalya Viswavidyalaya, Indore in 1999. He completed Master of Philosophy from Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda in 1996. His dissertation work on a study on the understanding of basic arithmetic concepts among the students at the terminal stage of secondary education. He completed his post-graduation in Master of Education from Regional College of Education, Mysore, a consistent college of National NCRT, New Delhi. He obtained graduation education in the methods of teaching mathematics and sciences from Andhra University, Visakhapatnam. He is working as assistant professor, associate professor, and now presently professor since 1997 at Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda. He also worked as Dean International Affairs at the Assumption University, Bangkok, Thailand. He also worked as guest professor in Stockholm University, Institute of International Education, Sweden Swedish Institute as a guest professor. At his credential, he guided 10 PhD students and awarded at present 6 students for research scholars working for the PhD degrees. He is also member of Board of Studies for so many international national schools in India. At his credential, he supervised many projects which are related to the education. For example, a study on the perceptions of the students on the assessment practices in higher education, digital repository of researchers in education management, development of MOOCs on policy making in education and curriculum development, case studies on successful women in educational management, a study on career aspirations of women in higher education, interdisciplinary research in education management, academic management in the universities of Northeast regions of India, funded by different funding agencies like UGC, NCRT, etc. He also published Teacher Education in Global Era, Perspectives and Practices, which is published in Springer International editions, massive open online courses on emerging landscape of digital learning in India, a monograph for IEEP Paris 2017, student assessment in higher education book chapter, says publication New Delhi. So like this, he also published so many research articles, monographs, and so many case studies in national, international reputation. Based on his biodata, he is one of the specialists in the education research. So we are fortunate to have this type of resource person for our session. So on behalf of organizing committee, I welcome you and present your valuable presentations to our audience. Thank you, sir. I welcome you for presentation. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much for your nice introduction. The screen is clear now.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It is audible, sir. You can proceed, sir.
The screen is also clear. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Kindly continue.
So friends, at the outset, let me thank the PVKN Government Autonomous College, Chittoor, the principal of the institution, Dr. Anand Reddy, and the convener of this program, Dr. P. Sujana and her team. I consider this as a very, very important platform because we have time to reflect on our own practices and then come out with the alternative strategies to make our teaching learning process more vibrant and more effective. Friends, we have this National Education Policy 2020, which has come out with a lot of expectations and aspirations. And the policies cannot be effective unless and until we, the educators working at the institutional level, understand them properly and implement them in our day-to-day activities in our classroom teaching learning process. So in that particular context, I consider this faculty development program is very important in terms of understanding the national expectations, national goals, and then how we really convert these policies into effective programs, which is a very, very important thing too. Friends, one particular aspiration that the National Education Policy talks about is to increase the gross enrollment ratio in the universities by giving educational access and the enrollment. So they put a target by 2030-35, we need to have 50% of gross enrollment ratio in the universities. Therefore, we could see a lot of expansion is happening in higher education system, and the expansion is very rapid. Now, the second important aspect is improve the quality and the quality of teaching and learning process. So to bring this into the fold of quality, the University Grants Commission has come out with a variety of programs. And one such program is this outcome-based curriculum framework. So the University Grants Commission initiated a flagship program called EQUIP, Education Quality Upgradation and Inclusion Programs. We have a RISE as an important program that's happening in this country, which talks about the revitalizing infrastructure and systems in education. And we have a GNAN, which is an important program the UGC has conceptualized and implementing, is the Global Initiative for Academic Network. And then the National Institutional Ranking Framework. So all these different kinds of programs are helping the institutions to assess themselves, position themselves into the quality parameters, and thereby they not only provide access to education to people, but also the quality education. So in the context of quality education,
Sir, sorry to interrupt you, sir.
Outcome-based. Hello?
Sir,
The
are you
voice is
sharing
clear?
your PPT, sir?
No, the
It's not
PPT
visible.
sharing is
It's not visible.
PPT sharing.
Sir, once again, stop and share once again, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to do it again.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Is it visible?
No, sir.
The screen is visible now?
No, it is on only saying that admin is sharing his content.
Yeah, it's visible here. I can see it on my screen. Doesn't matter. Okay.
Sir, if you turn off your video, then it may come, sir. The net is slow.
Okay. Yeah, still it is, no, I think, okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, we'll proceed. Yeah, I can share the PPT to you later at the end of my presentation. There is
Okay,
some
sir.
technical issues in the WebEx.
Sir,
Fine, yeah.
just mail me, sir. We will share from here.
Pardon?
Mail it to us, then we'll share it from here.
Okay, yeah. There is something is happening here. Okay, fine, yeah. So let me continue. I'll send it to you later. Okay, fine. So the first and the foremost task which the University Grants Commission has started is to revamp the curriculum and the curriculum design, and aligning with the recommendations of the National Education Policy, we could see a kind of transformation in our outlook into education system that has happened. Today, right from the schooling to higher education, we are not talking in terms of teaching, but we are talking in terms of learning. So the whole focus is moved from teaching centered or the teacher centered to the learner centered, learner centric. And the movement is gone from information to transformation. And the focus is from instruction to construction. So when our educational approaches, beliefs, ideologies are moving from one perspective to another perspective, taking into consideration of the challenges that we are facing at large in the institutional setup. So we need to adopt a different way of assessing our students in higher education, which is a very urgent need, and therefore the institution are requested to change into outcome-based curriculum frameworks. So in the recent past, we are so familiar in terms of certain very important terminologies. We talk about the instructional objectives, Bloom's taxonomy. We talk about the course outcomes, program outcomes, unit outcomes. And then we also come across the direct assessment, indirect assessment. Ultimately, we wanted to make a system which is authentic in terms of the assessments, and also make our students and the stakeholders satisfied with the kind of practices that we are implementing in the institutions. So friends, when you talk about the assessment, we need to make assessment authentic, which is a very, very important thing that has to be practiced in the institutions. And thereby, we talk about evidence-based assessments. We talk about the outcome-based assessments. We talk about the impact-oriented assessments. So all these things essentially talks about how these assessment practices that are happening in the institutions are of the high quality, and they are fit for the purpose, and we come and improve the quality of education. Friends, we are also familiar with, I'm sure some of the speakers must have discussed with you about the need of assessment in the context of assessment for learning and assessment of learning, and thereby how our teaching strategies or assessment tools need to be aligned with our perspectives. Gone on the days when we use assessments as a tool to evaluate students' learning, certification, and graduation, so on and so forth. But today, we are talking in the context of making use of assessments for improving learning, engaging the students, his self-reflections, and ultimately, we want to make him a self-learner, a lifelong learner, a self-learner. Friends, in this context, when I talk about the direct assessment tools and the indirect assessment tools today with you, let me propose certain strong the basic assumptions about assessments. The first and foremost thing, as educators, we need to distinguish between assessment culture and the testing culture in higher education, which we need to think seriously about this. In the name of assessment, are we really promoting a culture of testing or a culture of assessment? The basic difference between these two is the assessment culture is a culture which is inclusive. It encourages students, it engages students into the process, and therefore there is a willingness on the part of students to take part in the assessment process. But when we see as a testing culture, there is a tone of fear, there is a tone of control, there is a tone of labeling, and thereby you see a different kind of the practices that usually happens in the university systems, in the colleges. And thereby often we listen to the comments in the general public about our systems of assessment and their credibility. So friends, the first assumption that I make is there is a distinction between a testing culture and an assessment culture. And the educators need to understand this and try to create a kind of a culture within the institutions which is encouraging, which is inclusive, and which is a part of learning process. And the second important thing is one tool or a test cannot measure all the learning outcomes that we are talking about. The learning outcome framework usually we discuss in terms of knowledge, in terms of skills, in terms of the attitudes, the behavioral changes. All these things cannot be measured with help of one single test. So keeping these two things in mind, and then try to understand what are those important things which need to be measured at the system of higher education, and how those things can be measured with the proper evidences, with the credibility and authenticity. Therefore, the 6 principles of assessment, whether it is a direct or indirect, one has to keep in mind when designing an appropriate method or a model of assessment of students' learning. It is one important principle is the alignment. What you teach in the classroom, what is the aim of a particular program, and what you assess. If they are not properly aligned, probably it leads to confusion. So if you want to integrate the whole process, with which purpose a particular program is designed, a program is offered, and to accomplish those objectives, how the instructional strategies are mapped, or outcomes are integrated, and then how effectively we understand whether we accomplish these objectives or no with above appropriate assessment techniques. Therefore, the first important principle of an assessment is the alignment. The alignment tells us that assessment is not an isolated activity in the teaching learning process. The assessment is an integral part of teaching learning process. Therefore, it has to be aligned. It has to be aligned with the program objectives, to course objectives, your teaching learning strategies, and thereby you will make certain kind of judgments with respect to the program, the evaluation. You know, every program that we design in higher education, in that matter, in any level of education, we basically design with certain objectives in mind. The objectives of the program basically talks about what we are aiming for at the end of 1 year, if it is a 1-year program, at the end of 3 years, it is a graduation program, or end of 2 years, it's a post-graduation program. So friends, to realize these objectives of a program, we design certain contents in the form of a syllabus, and each syllabus intrinsically holds certain learning outcomes. Therefore, the outcomes of the courses altogether cumulatively lead to the outcome of a program. The outcome of the programs cumulatively talks about the outcome of the institution. the outcome of the institution is its reputation, its success, and it also talks about its accountability to the stakeholders. Friends, keeping these in mind, most of you must have realized that a lot of testings have been introduced right from the schools, not only at the national level, but the international level. To begin with PISA, very popular international student assessments. It's a program of international student assessment which are so popular, where you check where the learning outcomes of the students in specific subject areas, then try to compare their performance, and thereby there are certain the consequences of this comparison. And today we talked so much about Finnish education, which is the school education, which is the superior in the world in terms of their scores, continuously higher in PISA scores. So to popularize a system of practice and comparing the performance of the learners across the globe, we need to have a credible assessment systems, which should be impact-oriented, outcome-based, and well-defined. And we also made several initiatives in India as well. When we talk in terms of the national assessment survey, we have a national assessment surveys happening in school education in this country, where students are assessed on different subjects and they are compared. And this exercise is used to make a informed decision making in terms of recruitment of teachers, the professional development of teachers, curriculum renovations, development of digital resources, and many more. So the data that we collect through these assessment procedures, which are well accepted, which are well practiced, will result into the development of the institution, development of the system as a whole. One, it talks about the quality. Number two, it talks about the need for improvement. It talks about the areas in which professional development of teachers are required. That's how the institutional planning basically takes place. So when I was talking about the assessment practices in the context of direct and indirect assessment tools, friends, we need to align these assessment tools with our national recommendations and the policy framework. Today, we have been talking about the graduate attributes. I'm sure that we are all familiar with this. So in no time, probably in 1-2 years, we will have graduate attributes, professional standards of graduates and postgraduates. And the government is working even to come out with the professional standards of university teachers as well. So the moment we establish the standards that can be used as a frame of reference to assess our individual positions at individual level as well as the institutional level. So such a framework is useful to reorganize the system on the lines of quality and the quality improvement. Friends, the share with you today. Why? Because if these are the graduate attributes that you are aiming for as the outcome-based program, and then we need to understand what are the different types of assessment tools that we need to really think of. If they are not really existing, how collectively we can design various authentic assessment tools, thereby all these graduate attributes can be better understood through our programs, through our institutional management systems, through our teaching and learning process. Friends, if I share with you the learning outcome based curriculum framework of UGC, it categorically talks about the graduate attributes. You know, these graduate attributes are so extensively listed. What does it mean? It means if any student enter into a graduate program, a program for 3 hours, 3 years, at the end of the program, what are the take homes? Which means how do you describe a graduate of an Indian college or Indian university? How they should be described? I must tell you, this is a very, very important framework that's happening in this country. So they talk about certain disciplinary knowledge which is important, which means any graduate in a particular discipline should have some level of discipline knowledge. And the NEP also talks about multidisciplinary programs and multidisciplinary understandings and competencies among the students. So specific disciplinary knowledge in terms of the concepts, in terms of theories, in terms of hello. Hello.
Sir, yes, sir. Continue, sir, please.
Yeah, sorry, there was some disturbance happened. I don't know. Okay.
No,
Yeah.
no problem, sir. Please continue.
So the graduate attributes are very, very important to make a program more meaningful and also clear to the learner as well as the stakeholders. So the first important area that was mentioned in learning outcome-based curriculum framework of UGC, it talks about disciplinary knowledge, which is important. And it also talks about certain generic competencies. The National Education Policy talks about the 21st century skills, where it highlights about communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. So how these generic skills can be the part of our program design and also the components in the teaching learning process. Thereby, students acquire these competencies, and these competencies are important for them to position into the world of work, not only at the local level, but at the global level. Therefore, apart from the curriculum, apart from the disciplinary knowledge, we also need to focus about certain generic competencies in our students. These are the graduate attributes. This is what expected by any program that we offer in a college or a university. And to list down these generic competencies, the report clearly says we must develop communication skills, critical thinking, problem solving, analytical reasoning, research skills, cooperative and collaborative skills, scientific reasoning, reflective thinking, digital literacy, self-directed learning, multicultural competency, moral and ethical reasoning, leadership, and lifelong learning skills. Friends, we are responsible as educators in the higher education system to transact this, to provide opportunities to our learners to acquire disciplinary knowledge, and along with all the generic skills that I talked about. So in this particular context, when you see an assessment practice that we do, if we do an assessment practice of a single tool, let us say the oral test or the written test, I think usually we follow a written test, and even the written test at the end of the examination, a summative test, which doesn't really talk about several of generic skills that we talk about. Therefore, a fine mix of what we call a continuous assessment process, the fine mix of formative and summative assessment practices with the diagnostic nature will really help the students to learn and also helps the teachers to strategize the teaching learning process in a more effective way. And it also helps the institution to display their competency and the reputation and credibility to the system as an accountability measure. And therefore, we need to really come across or think of various assessment tools that can be applied at various levels of our teaching and learning process. Friends, teaching and learning is a continuous process. So when it is a continuous process, the assessment also need to be continuous. Therefore, somebody said, in the name of assessment, we should not build the doors, rather we should build the windows. If I repeat again, in the name of assessment practices, we should not build the doors, rather we should build the windows. What does it mean? It means we must provide ample opportunities for people to look into, reflect, and then put step forward in the learning journey. And such a learning journey will be useful in terms of understanding where they are and also positioning themselves to a very positive direction of the learning, and it becomes a self-directed, self-initiated learner, which is very much needed in our education system today. Therefore, moving from a mere grade or a score at the end of a particular year, a particular term, do not suffice the purpose of learning at higher education. And thereby, we need to come out with multiple alternatives, mechanisms to understand how we are teaching in the system, and also to understand how our students are learning, and also enable our students to understand where they are and what they need to do to strengthen their learning process. I'm very happy that we reached to this stage of understanding assessment not as an administrative tool, but a learning strategy. Therefore, the assessment practices that we have been offering in higher education today have to be reviewed from a very different perspective. I was the part of a national research project commissioned by Niti Aayog in collaboration with the National Institution of Educational Planning and Administration, Delhi. And we studied various aspects of teaching and learning, and assessment was a very important part of it. And thereby, we have written a few chapters in Indian Higher Education Report, which was published by the SAGE. The Indian Higher Education Report is IHER 2018, where I presented the assessment practices in Indian higher education system. Friends, we are talking certain other reforms also. I would like to link these things to our practice. On the one way, we are talking about a choice-based credit system, where the learners need to be given freedom to choose, aligned with the program objectives, and create a framework for the credit transfers. And then other side, we are talking about the semester systems. And the other side, we are talking about internal and external assessment practices with a different kind of the ratio that we are adopting. In some universities, we have 30% internal and 70% the external assessment practices. And now the institutional mechanism is coming towards the 60-40, or in some institutions 50-50, which means assessment from a centralized, the end is shifting to a contextualized, a teacher-oriented, learner-centric assessment practice. And the kind of assessments that we are talking about is more or less a written examination. A written examination at the end of a semester, at the end of an year. And these written examinations are essentially an essay type in most of the institutions. So friends, imagine if we consider this written examination as a direct assessment. It is direct assessment because we take certain decisions based on the direct scores that we obtained. And now you try to see whether to what extent this direct assessment really assess the generic skills of the learner. As educators working in the system, we are all familiar with the kind of disadvantages of these written examinations, especially the essay type. And another practice that usually we have is oral examination. Oral examination is also a kind of an examination where the certain grades and scores are given, which is a direct the assessment tool. And here, the student expresses, communicates what he actually got into the program, got out of the program that he talks about. So the program outcomes can be linked to what the learner expresses. And friends, here, let us say we have a program and the program is having several courses. But how much time that can be given to each learner, each student, to express what he knows? And then we really need to reflect to what extent this particular tool is useful in assessing the both disciplinary knowledge as well as the generic competencies, generic skills. Friends, some of the institutions are also using certain open book examination. You know, the closed book examinations are generally followed across the country. But there are a few institutions where you talk about Indian Institute of Management and a few IITs. They talk about the open book examination where certain higher order thinking skills can be assessed. The articulation of the students can be assessed. But here, to what extent the educators are ready and competent enough to design such questions which can be used for open book examination. So these examinations, when result into certain scores and evidence, it's more or less testing the knowledge, testing the skill, testing the attitudes of the students, and they are the direct assessment tools. So we have the case study analysis. In certain faculties, they use the case study where a simulated situation can be given and then try to understand what is that logical understanding of the learner and how he's able to apply the knowledge, the theory that he acquired into a context, contextualizing the knowledge and understanding the problem and resolving it. And you also come across certain portfolios where students have a self-reflection diaries. in a particular year or in a particular semester of a particular program, what courses that student has undergone, and in each course, what he has learned by engaging himself into the process of teaching and learning process. So friends, the portfolios, development of portfolio by the students, and then making a presentation on it in terms of in the first semester, these many number of courses he studied and these kind of skills that he acquired, and then demonstrating them into. So we have the n number of assessment practices as we have n number of learning experiences. See, when as a teacher, I am giving n number of learning experiences, and I believe that I can give n number of learning experiences to my students, then I also should believe that I can assess students' learning outcomes with multiple alternative assessment tools. And if the tool is for learning, the assessment is for learning, your observation, your expression, your interaction with the learner, and you are allowing the students to articulate and represent, organizing a group discussion within a seminaring mode, workshop mode, a case study approach, submission of a project reports, your written test, your oral test. Friends, all these things, your multiple choice questions, all these things are useful in the teaching learning process. But as an educator, we must take proper advantage of these tools in the right context and the right purpose. And that decision is a very, very important thing that every educator need to think of. So friends, when you talk about a direct assessment tool, this is the tool which gives us an evidence, a score on which we can make certain decisions with respect to our learning teaching process. But many of the assessment and accreditation process, even when you talk about NAAC assessment, I'm sure that all of you are familiar with the NAAC assessment process. The NAAC assessment do not see the direct evidences that we provide to them, but they are also interested to collect the indirect evidences by using various tools. What are those indirect tools? For example, if you want to know the attitude of your students in a particular subject or in the program of study, probably the direct testings may not tell you. The mere academic grade will not tell us the level of attitude a person is holding towards the subject. Probably out of fear, probably with kind of memorization, he could score high without developing any attitude towards the subject. Therefore, what NAAC says, it talks about the number of hours a student spent in a library, the percentage of participation of students in academic and cultural discussions. Or you talk about the satisfaction of the students. You know, in the entire assessment scheme, we never discuss about to what extent our students are satisfied with the programs. We have a feedback mechanisms now coming up. So a student survey is coming up. So these are the indirect tools for the assessment. And this assessment not only talks about a program, not only talks about a teacher, not only talks about a course, but it talks about the institution as a whole as well. Or you talk about the employer satisfaction surveys. You prepared engineers, and we have a placements. Of course, the number of placements that took place is also an indirect indicator, an assessment tool. And the employer's satisfaction survey, to what extent these prospective corporate sectors, industrial organizations are happy with our students when they go and join in their world of work. Friends, which is an indirect tool for assessment. So what I mean to say is, along with your direct assessment tools, whether you talk in terms of a written test or an oral test or a demonstration or a case study or a portfolio, we also need to generate data in terms of the satisfaction of the students, satisfaction of the different stakeholders. Thereby, we need to really understand, in management we call it as 360-degree appraisal. A program needs to be appraised in a 360-degree approach in terms of who are the people involved into the program, what were the expectations, what were the strategies applied, and how these strategies really impacted the beneficiary students. And at a different level, the employers, and at the different level, the other stakeholders that you talk about. That's how an institution over a period of time becomes accountable to the larger, the macro system of education. Friends, therefore, today, most of the assessment practices in higher education are giving importance both to the direct assessment tools and the indirect assessment tools. The direct assessment tools need to be aligned with the program objectives, with the course objectives, and with also the institutional objectives. You know, the institutional objectives talks about its vision, mission. They are not simply there in the institution for the namesake. So the institutional vision, mission, and objectives need to have some space in the program design. And the program design should have some space in the course design. Therefore, these three levels, institutional level, program level, and course level, the outcomes need to be integrated and need to be aligned, and the direct assessment tools can be used. You talk about the oral testing, the examinations, the questions, the vivavos, the observations, portfolio development, problem-solving abilities, quizzes, MCQs, essay writing, submission of a dissertation, demonstration, performance. Friends, we have several mechanisms to assess students' learning outcomes. And the student learning outcomes need to be mapped with the assessment practice that we do. Therefore, when I began my presentation, I categorically mentioned that we need to believe strongly that all learning outcomes cannot be assessed with a single assessment tool. And thereby, we must encourage our students, our stakeholders, and encourage our colleagues to come out with alternative assessment practices. Thereby, at every level of learning, we may reform our systems. We can improve our teaching learning process. So by doing so, we make the entire process is a really enabling process, is something which is encouraging process, is something where the empowerment of the learner takes place at the end. Therefore, the whole philosophy of assessment changes from a fear to a pleasure. So a fear to pleasure basically depends on how we understand the learning outcomes, to teaching strategies, to assess tools, and then integrate to the reforms at the end that we talk about. So along with the direct tools, we also need to keep in mind that indirect tools which are essential in terms of the learner's participation, learner's satisfaction, and many other aspects where there are certain things which do not cover in the direct assessment procedures as the limitation of direct assessments. We need to think of indirect assessment procedures where they indirectly help us to redesign our programs in a more effective and efficient way. So friends, to sum up my presentation and leave it a few minutes for your question and answers, I would end up by saying that both direct and indirect assessment tools are essential to be understood and designed in every program and the course that individuals are engaged in. And please remember, these things cannot be considered as a mechanistic process. That's how, when I was talking to different university teachers, both in the technical, medical, and social sciences, I could see the people using the terminologies in terms of the Bloom's affective, the cognitive psychomotor domains, the knowledge, understanding, application, analysis, evaluation, creativity, all these things are familiar. But what is required is to understand and distinguish the level of this cognitive development. So when you distinguish the level of this development, you will be able to apply a suitable teaching strategy to take a learner from knowledge level to application level, or application level to a creativity level. So when you are interested to take them, you also come out with alternative strategies of teaching, instructional design. Whether it is online, offline, you come out with innovative pedagogical models. So when you are implementing innovative pedagogical models, I am sure certainly we are curious to know to what extent our efforts are successful in this process. So the moment you ask to what extent my efforts are successful as a teacher, I'm assessing myself. And the moment I ask a question, to what extent my learners are successful in acquiring the program objectives, in acquiring the course objectives, in acquiring the graduate attributes which the national framework designs, then you are talking the assessment of students. And of course, the standards, the professional standards of graduates are also useful to certification and licensing, and then employability. All these matters come into consideration. So friends, the direct, indirect assessment tools are basically a holistic approach to assessment in higher education. And the purpose of this holistic assessment in higher education is to improve the quality of teaching learning process and improve the professional standards of our graduates and to improve the credibility of our institutions. And please remember, the quality cannot be achieved accidentally. Quality cannot be achieved accidentally. It needs our intelligent and intentional efforts. So friends, to change this entire system of assessment in our institutions, we must put our intelligent and intentional efforts to make this integrated whole of assessment system in higher education. And this will certainly help us to accomplish our national goals, which are clearly stated in National Education Policy 2020. With this, I stop my presentation, and I welcome some of your observations and any questions. Over to organizers. Over to organizers, please.
Sir, can you hear? Sir?
Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the elaborate and well explained about the various methods of evaluation techniques, assessment methods. The assessment is backbone for any institution. Otherwise, we cannot justify, or otherwise we cannot decide the students' quality in terms of ranking, whatever may be. So in this presentation, we know about the value of assessment, direct as well as indirect assessment methods evaluated for the future of the student. Then only the outcome of the institution will be fulfilled and we can supply the fruitful, successful citizens to the society. So thank you very much, sir. We have enlightened about so many aspects of tools which are used in the assessment, and the value of the assessment also very interesting. And our participants also like this topic very much, as in the offline participants, we are directly looking at their faces. Thank you for giving this opportunity. Our rapporteur summarize something about these things. So before that, we have some interaction with the audience. I invite audience or participants for the interaction. So anyone can have question in the chat box, or you can directly ask here in the mic. So any questions, sir? Please.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Really, it is a wonderful. A wonderful lecture, sir, and simply extempo. Sir, my small
Can you
query.
please
World's best.
introduce yourself, please?
Sir, I'm asking the question, sir. Just, it's not a question.
Can you please introduce yourself, please?
Good afternoon, sir. Myself, Dr. Mohan Behra from PVKN Government College, Chittoor, Faculty Department of Botany. I must thankful on behalf of all the participants. I must thankful. Your lecture is very
Yeah.
need of the day and really extempo. Sir, my small, it is a discussion, not question. The world's best education system, Finnish education system, you mentioned earlier part of your talk. So what are the criteria of that Finland education system and where we are lacking? In spite of many practices, many assessment systems, direct, indirect, still we are lagging in world scenario. So my query is, what are the areas of concern in India in particular? So what are the strategy for in future generation, how to overcome, at least how to, some it may not be at least up to the Finland. So what are the areas of concern? So that is my small query, sir, where we are lagging.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a very interesting question. And it actually reminds me my experience when I was in Stockholm University as a visiting professor. This was a very interesting thing for me. And I was curious to know, what is this Finnish education system? Became so popular within no time. And what are they doing in their institutions? What the teachers are doing in their classrooms, and how the system at the macro level monitoring. A host of things came to my mind, and I made a visit to certain schools as well as universities. Friends, I must share with you, exactly I started my presentation with that particular assumption that we must change our system from assessment, the testing culture to assessment culture. And that assessment culture is assessment for learning, not assessment of learning. In Western universities, especially in Finland, where you could see the examination is never be a fear of students right from the school to universities. I could see a kind of enthusiasm in students to participate in that process, thereby, in his words, I'm talking about a student of a higher secondary school in Finland. He says, I'm so happy today because I'm going to know what I still need to understand. No, it's not that there is an examination today, then I will be tested, I will be labeled, I will be given some scores, or I will be passed or failed. Probably these were the outcomes usually we listen, not only in India, in the Asian context. But there, the learner is fully aware of a particular process. And he thinks that this process helps him to understand where he stands. He understands what he knows and what he is still required to know. This kind of perspective is very useful for people to position the learning styles. So the fear of failure is something which is dominated in the system of education, especially in the Asian perspective. And the teaching learning is basically examination oriented because it is aligned in that way. And therefore, teachers teach in this class, teachers teach in the universities, But if the learner knows that these things may not come in the examinations, and the level of motivation in the learner comes down. So there is a vicious circle in terms of how our teaching learning is aligned with the model of examinations that we are actually talking about. And thereby the learning process ends with examination, and every year is a fresh year for learner, and there is no continuity into the learning process. So friends, this question prompted me to share one of the prominent researches that I conducted was to see to what extent the learning is sustained in the learner. You know, very interesting study. We have taken a very small group of students in the higher education system, and we started examining students after teaching in frequent intervals. And we have announced the date, and prior to the date of final exam, a month before and 2 months before the exams were conducted. And after the final examination also, we conducted after 1 month, one examination, and after 2 months of the final examination, another exam. Hope you all understood. So if I can speak in Telugu, final examination announce చేసేకు ముందు ఒక నెల రోజు ముందు ఒక 2 నెలల ముందు ఎగ్జామినేషన్లు కండక్ట్ చేసి ఫైనల్ ఎగ్జామినేషన్ అయిన తర్వాత కూడా ఒక నెల తర్వాత 2 నెలల తర్వాత కూడా ఎగ్జామినేషన్ కండక్ట్ చేసి వాటిలో నుంచి వచ్చిన మార్కులు ఒక గ్రాఫికల్ రిప్రజెంటేషన్ లో ప్రెజెంట్ చేస్తే friends, we could see a normal probability curve. What does it mean? So when there is an examination, students acquire, read, and their performance is gradually high during the examination time. But after that final examination, the retention, the sustenance of the knowledge gradually decreased from 1 month to the 2 months, and 3rd month probably they become zero. So what I mean to say is we need to change the perspective of assessment as a learning strategy, not assessment for learning, assessment, not assessment of learning. I think this is one important thing which I can share, and most of the things are the things happen in a free environment. You know, when there is a freedom, individuals work beyond their capacities. But people, when they work in fear, then the original capacities also be disappear. So this is certain things, the ambience, the learning culture, and the kind of the approach they follow in the teaching learning. All these things really make a system more vibrant. And we have realized the importance of that now. And thereby the government of India or the Central Board of Secondary Education and School Education, the University Grants Commission, or the NAC assessments that you are talking about, they all talk about the culture, the learning culture that institution can promote, and the learning values the institution can instill in the learner. And that's how things happen. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry that I a little bit extended. Yeah.
Thank you very
Any
much.
other question, please?
Sir, one more query, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, being expert in this area, sir,
Yeah.
new educational policy came into the force. And can you achieve some
Yeah.
of the goals at par with the Finnish,
Yeah.
the education system with the NEP 2021, sir? What is your observation or
Yeah.
what our expectation, sir?
Okay, fine. So you are the same one asked the first question as well?
Sir,
You're the
NEP,
different one.
new educational
No, I
policy
understand.
came into.
Yeah.
Can you achieve some of the goals, some of the objectives to achieve the goal, sir?
See, there is no goal, no objective which is presented in NAP in in such a way that we cannot achieve. All the goals, the objectives are the targets, and these targets can be very well achieved if we come out of our comfort zones. The moment we feel that we work as we have been working all these years, probably things will become very, very difficult for us. But the moment you get excited with the projections, with the aspirations, with the visualization in the national policy document, and you come out of your comfort zones, think creatively, and expand our capacities, work together collectively as a learning community, friends, I assure you that we will be able to achieve the National Education Policy 2020 very soon, not too that long that the policy was talking about. So what is most important is we must understand the need for elevating the system to next level. You know, the vision of the policy talks about we must make India as a global knowledge power. So friends, already we are contributing to the global workforce. To name few things, we have all topmost corporate industries in US. The CEOs are from India. We feel so proud. You talk about the Sundar Pichai Google, or you talk about the Apple. I think there are many Indian corporates are leading the industries. So we are in the process. But if we put our things more organized way, and we put all our energies into a focal direction, and achieving NEP goals cannot remain as a distant dream, for which we all need to work as learning communities. We all need to understand our role as educators in the higher education system. Then certainly it will be achieved, and our next generation, who will be the beneficiaries of the system, will flourish and will enjoy the status of the global knowledge power, for which we need to work now. Thank you. I think I answered your question.
Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
సార్ శుభ సాయంకాలం సార్. హలో, గుడ్ ఈవినింగ్
Yes,
సార్.
please. Yeah. Good evening. Good evening. Please say.
Online viewers, any queries? Offline viewers already asked many questions. Thank you, sir. Sir, today's topic, direct, indirect, continuous assessment tools for attain program outcomes and course outcomes. You are very suitable person for explaining all things
today's topic. Sir starts with how to improve the gross enrollment ratio based on new educational policy at the time of 2035. Sir also explained distinguish between teacher-centered learning method to student-centered method, and also different direct, indirect assessment tools. So one tool is not possible to assess the student's knowledge. So we want to improve multidiscipline tools. It's also explained by very well the sir. Sir revealed the importance of different tools. These tools are having the 2021 century skills. So compulsory, we improve our schools in our teaching, sir. So different institutional assessment tools also explained by our sir. For example, Indian Institute of Management. So these tools are very useful to assessing the teaching learning process. So thank you very much, sir, for your elaborating session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I wish you all the best for your next course of study. Thank you.
So on behalf of organizers, I will thank for giving this session, chairing this session to me and our colleague, Dr. Munaya sir. This is now handovering to our coordinator of this program for further announcements. Thank you for bearing us.
Sir, thank you very much, sir. It's a wonderful, lively session. All the offline participants really enjoyed your session, and voice was very clear, and it was very much understandable, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Now I have few announcements for
Yeah.
online and offline participants. Sir, we have posted the yesterday's forenoon and afternoon attendance in the FDP WhatsApp group. If anyone are not in that group, kindly give us message. We'll join in that. Based on that attendance only, and based on your qualification marks in 5 quizzes only, certificates will be issued. Kindly cooperate. And this is really to assess the exit outcomes of our FDP. And thank you. And I request all of you to join by sharply 10 a.m. tomorrow for the third day faculty development program. Thank you, one and all.